welcome to Woman Up, the podcast series by Desperate Art Wives. Woman Up is a podcast talking to women artists, creatives, art critics, feminist historians, activists and more. The series was conceived by Desperate Art Wives founder Amy Dignam in collaboration with me, Susan Merrick. Desperate Art Wives is a platform established in 2010 for women artists who are also mothers and carers. Amy's work focuses on domestic disorder, unsteady identity, power and dysfunction. And I'm an artist interested in feminism, language, power and access. In this platform, we share conversations with women that inspire us and our work, whilst producing a long-form content of resources for other people to access. Hello and welcome to Woman Up. Woman Up is the podcast series from Desperate Art Wives. I'm Susan Merrick, and I'm here today with Melissa Mostyn. Melissa is an award-nominated artist and filmmaker. Right? Yes. Melissa is also a mother and a carer. And today we're going to talk about everything, okay? Okay. Hello. Lovely to meet you, Melissa. Nice to see you too, Susan. Well, I have my first question, but it is really broad. Please, can you give us your story? Tell us about your background. How you got involved in filmmaking, writing and visual art. Wow, that's a huge question. Okay, so I'm from a family of writers and artists. So it's in my blood anyway. I've grown up absorbing it. So I've always carried this around with me throughout my life. But early on, I also realised I wanted to become a fashion designer. So I went to study fashion. I did an MA in fashion journalism at Central St Martin's. Then afterwards, I tried to go freelance in fashion journalism. But my main challenge was the barriers that I had to face everywhere, because back then, we're talking about the mid-90s, and this meant really that the telephone was king. So it felt like everywhere I submitted to, whether it was editing, photography, design, most of the communication was done by phone. So I was always chasing people up, trying to chase deadlines. It was really difficult to get their attention to explain what my requirements were as a deaf person. So it meant that I was published rarely, because of the barriers I would face again and again. Few people or places were prepared to adapt, so I decided to change direction. I decided that I would go and work within the arts, because I knew straight away from already seeing plenty of deaf and disabled artists working and making progress that it would be a better setting to get involved in. So I set up a deaf arts project called Salon, and that was funded by Arts Council England. And it was also supported by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. I ran Salon for 5 years, and what we did was partner with a mainstream or arts organisation, and we ran residencies with them. It was basically a model for deaf artists, for deaf people, and we were doing work on the premises of that art organisation. Our aim was to create deaf conceptual art. There's a lot of debate about deaf people being very visual, and we wanted to test that theory and to challenge it. It was a big challenge, specifically when we were working with one organisation called Stour Valley Arts in Kent. So basically, they had a very, very small office in the middle of an enormous forest called King's Wood. Their philosophy was to create arts using materials that were already within the forest, which was incredibly difficult. But it was great too, because it really pushed everyone to think creatively. So we just basically let all the artists go off into the forest. The artists would go into the forest and explore, look around, find all the materials that exist within the forest already, and then decide what they wanted to create. They all created 3D work, temporary installations that would naturally deteriorate within the forest environment. It was an amazing, amazing experience, very enriching. However, at the same time, one of the biggest issues of Salon, I think, was that it was too ahead of its time. I mean, obviously, there are lots of deaf artists who have creative talent, but what level they are able to work at is less clear. So you saw that there were deaf and disabled artists out there, and you thought, great, I can get involved in that area. And then you set up Salon as a very specific project. So this is two questions, really. One, how was that project received outside of the project itself? And two, when you yourself were outside the project, how were you received and how did you find work? Okay, well, firstly, we had a lot of advice from Arts Council England. Specifically, one person, they were really supportive of this, and there was specifically one person at ACE who worked in the South East office, and she's left now. Her name is Sarah Pickthall. She was a really wonderful person, really, really supportive, and she had worked for Shape previously as well. So she was really knowledgeable about deaf artists, and she worked with John Wilson as well, and she was head of training at Shape when John was deaf arts officer. So that's how she had such knowledge about deaf arts. So she had that knowledge already, and she was really enthusiastic in her support of us. So she recommended people who we could approach, and we were very, very grateful to her. Overall, it was very well received. We promoted our work through an extended documentary that we made, which was directed by one of my favourite deaf filmmakers, Samuel Daw. It was a wonderful documentary. I think it was 45 minutes long. We cheated a little bit because film wasn't really part of the Salon Arts remit. But we had a good excuse, a very good excuse, and we were able to explain that to bring more deaf people to Salon, we needed to publicise it in a visual way. So it was part of the promotion, and Arts Council England gave their support and were fine about it. We were lucky that we didn't have to rely on the UK Film Council or anything like that. I would say that the documentary has become Salon's lasting legacy. Really. It was just wonderful. It was lovely. What was the documentary called, Melissa? It was called Salon in King's Woods. Yeah, I'll have a look. I'm not sure if you'd be able to access it on YouTube anymore. I'll have a look. If you give us a link, we can put that at the bottom of this podcast episode, Melissa. Oh, thank you. That would be great. Thank you. That would be great. Okay, so the other reason that Salon worked so well was that it effectively became a partnership with someone who later became my husband, Miles Thomas. So, and at that time, he was a full-time trainer and visual artist. Very, very talented and accomplished. Then, obviously, I got married. We had children. And the thing about marriage for us and having children was that my firstborn was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when she was 1 year old. She was already taking up a lot of my time at that point, and so running the Salon project was just not compatible with my new role. So Salon had to, I wouldn't say it was closed down, it's still there, but I would say it's dormant. It's what, it's waiting, you're right. So we were a CIC for a while, but when I became a mother, I just could not run that as well. So obviously, because I was caring for my first child, whose name is Isabel, I had to give up a lot already, as I was having to learn about her disability, how I could better adapt for her requirements. Really everything had to revolve around this little girl. So Salon, I suppose, became one of those temporarily abandoned babies. So Melissa, I know your life as an artist and your life as a mother has also merged, right? Yes, that's right. So tell me more about that. Well, obviously I've had to give up a lot with Isabel, but I've also gained a lot from having Isabel. So she's become an inspiration, another inspiration to me for other art projects, for other film projects. Because, as you know, I was able to explore my own feelings about having a disabled child, and the grief was massive. It was an all-consuming part of this, and I couldn't ignore it. I felt a real urgency to explore it, so I wound up making a film about it. It was a half-an-hour documentary, and it's called Listen, Even When Your Heart is Crying. It was made in association with Neath Films and BSLBT, the British Sign Language Broadcasting Trust, and it was very well received. And I hope it gave the audience a lot of education about parental grief, especially when the child is still living. It's a beautiful film, Melissa. I've watched it myself, and I really love how you talk about you and your own mother. You ask your own mother how she felt about having a deaf child, and then you talk about your own experiences about having your disabled daughter. And within it, there was a poem you wrote. Is that right? And Daryl Jackson performs the poem within the film. That was an incredibly moving part of the film. Very, very powerful. it made it really clear how it had affected you. Yes, so that was an extract from a book that I've written previously called My Daughter and I. And it was created from a blog that I had kept for 3 years, where I was writing every 2 weeks. That was during a period when I wasn't doing very much as an artist. I was having to wade through this grief, really. Wade through my relationship with my family, my husband, my child. And then I got pregnant with my youngest. And it was just this huge maelstrom of emotions. So, a very, very intense period. A very traumatic period. But it was also transformational. It was really transformational as well. Because you know that when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. So also this blog, really I was writing it for myself. I was putting it out there because I needed to get it out. But what I didn't expect was how people would respond to it. I developed a surprising following, which just kept on growing. That was when I decided that it should become a book. You can still buy that book on Kindle. I think it's about $3.99. I've been thinking about a follow-up book actually with regard to that. But at this time, I'm not quite ready. Because at the moment, I'm involved with a new project. It's an initiative for deaf script writers called Script, set up again by BSLBT. And what is different about this, it's a pilot project, is that its aim is to encourage deaf script writing skills. So I've been shortlisted, and there are five of us, all with very different ideas for a half-an-hour drama. One lucky winner from that 5 will be commissioned to have their script developed into an actual drama, which will be shown on BSL Zone, and it will be broadcast on Film 4. So it's really, really exciting. So really my idea, I guess it's a running theme now, is to continue to explore grief. And I'm approaching it almost like an artist's moving image. I'm focusing on 3 characters who are all named after 3 emotions associated with grief: denial, anger, and depression. Each character will be a different age, from a different background. One will be hearing, but the other 2 will be deaf. And all 3 of them will be linked at the moment through a metaphor for their grief. It's going to be a cartoon person, this metaphor for their grief. I haven't quite decided yet, but I think I want that person to be in shadow as much as possible, because I want it to be a reflection of the emotions of the 3 characters, their journeys. Okay, so you have the 3 people, and it's almost like the grief is the shadow of those people. Is that what you mean? Yes. Wow, that's giving me shivers. Yeah, and each person has different circumstances. One seems to be grieving over a lost child. Another one is escaping domestic violence, and the third one has just had a cochlear implant placed and has responded with almost disgust and is really struggling to come to terms with it after a lifetime of hearing aids. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. We're in the scripts stage at the moment, and after this stage, all 5 of us maybe will go through to the second round. I mean, it might only be 3 or 2 who go through, I don't know. But the second round will involve actually writing the whole script for that stage, and I'm really excited. That sounds fantastic, Melissa. So I want to ask, because I think there will be people who might be watching this, if you have caring responsibilities, maybe small children or other people you care for, and you are really busy anyway, how do you find the time to write, to apply for things? I know that we've talked about this before, about how we look at projects and then maybe match our own requirements, but in real life, how do you manage? Well, so for me, I had to make a decision to be really strict with myself about how much work I take on. I do get approached by a lot of people, but I can't say yes to everything. So I ensure that I choose projects to work on that allow me the flexibility for my own responsibilities, that allows me to be a carer. There was a project that I was involved with, I think it was last year and the year before. It was research and development. It was research and development for a project called Audio Visibility. It is a dressage project, which is about supporting a very well-known deaf Paralympian rider. Called Laurentia Tan, to improve her access to music for her performances. They are now moving forward into the next stage of the project, where they will be applying for funding to set up a project linked to the Tokyo Olympics, which was planned for this year. But unfortunately, because Arts Council England was very limited as to how much funding they were able to offer, it meant that I would have had to create my own funding application in order to be involved. And I knew that wasn't realistic. I knew I did not have the time to put in for that, so I turned them down. I was really disappointed to not be involved, but also I'd reached a stage with my art practice where I was going in a different direction and I wasn't sure how it could connect with dressage and music. It was really quite a different discipline altogether. I mean, it's another planet, really. What was really interesting was I realised that I didn't feel enthusiastic enough. My interest really does lie with filmmaking and my own drawing, which I'm still doing. So that is the direction in which I'm going. So really, in terms of caring, I think about how much I still have to do for Isabel now. And my son Ben, who's 8. He has also been quite an inspiration to me. He's so full of wonderment when he is learning about the world, and I see that. He has this phenomenal imagination, and he's been a really big part in helping me in terms of my vision with regard to my art practice. So basically, I try and aim for a maximum of 2 projects at any time, and that's it. I then have my cut-off. And the good thing about Isabel is that so far, touch wood, if I can find any wood around me, there we go. There is no emergency involved in her care at the moment. She's steady, stable, her health is good, and she's happy at school. So the only things that are ongoing, going on, are making sure she has the right equipment, making sure she has the right support in her education and her therapies. She doesn't need any medication anymore. She used to have quite bad seizures, up to 60 petty miles a day when she was maybe about 6 months old, when she was so tiny. She hasn't had one now since 2013, so we're talking about 7 years now, which is amazing. So I think that now we have a fairly stable routine, and I know how to manage in the routine that we're in, and I know how to find the time for what I have in my own art practice. But there was a time when I couldn't manage. We were having difficulty with contact with their father, and I experienced major burnout. This was about 3 years ago. It was what led me to developing meningitis and ending up in hospital. That was an awful time. But funnily enough, that also became an opportunity for me to go back into drawing, which I hadn't done for many, many years. I started doing very, very small, fine line drawings because that's all I could do. And at that time, when I was recovering from meningitis, I couldn't write. I wasn't able to think structurally or construct sentences. It was impossible. So I felt very much like my journalism skills had just disappeared. My memory was wiped. My energy was wiped. So drawing was the only creative outlet that I had. And I was lucky that it just happened to be something that I could enjoy and get on with. These small fine line drawings, which linked to my fashion illustration from many years ago, and so it was something that I'd always done. I really enjoyed it, and I was able to experiment looking at different papers and seeing how the paper you use affects the marks that you make. So when we met, Melissa, that was just after you were recovering from meningitis and you were still exhausted. But I was able to see some of that recovery, which was really beautiful to see. And to see your energy for film return and your passion for art, visual art, coming back. So you have the potential writing project that you're working on at the moment. Do you have any other potential projects coming up? Well, I've just been working with a production company called Drummer TV on a proposed pilot. And I've been involved exploring my journey as a deaf artist. And they're going to be looking at various people who are inspirations in different ways. But at the moment, I'm not sure if that's going to get made. So we're waiting to hear the results of the commission that we made very recently. Fingers crossed. Oh, good luck with that. Thank you for your time today, Melissa, and sharing everything with me. And I hope to see you again soon.